Hello, welcome to this next Rhino video. We're going to be looking at layers and best practice. We're looking at things called C-planes, which is the drawing planes that you work on, and we're going to have a quick look at how to duplicate edges and create curves from existing geometry. Okay, so I'm going to use this teapot as an example of the build, and I'm doing this because it's got some simple parts in it. So we're going to immediately talk about layers. So you can see layers up in this properties box here, and when attempting a build you can split it into its component parts. So I've got a body, which is this bit. I'm going to have a lid, I'm going to have a spout, and I'm going to have a handle, and I'm using an image to drive it. So I've got these all separated out into the layers. So let's have a look at that layer control. If I expand these out, I'll show you what I've got here. So the best practice that we're recommending for this module is having a hierarchy of layers, where you've got a body layer, which is the current layer at the moment, and I've got the curves turned on but the surfaces turned off. So I've separated out my curves, which are the lines, and the surfaces, which are the surfaces that you make with the lines, and that gives me ability to turn things off and on. So let's turn off this image to start with so we get a clearer view, and we'll start with the body. And if I turn on that surface there, you see I've generated a revolve. We'll turn everything else off for now, just so you can see that. So here is a profile which was revolved around a vertical line, and that gives us our surface. Okay, the same can be said for the lid. So I'm going to make lid current so I can turn off the body. You can't turn off the layer that's the current layer, so you have to jump around with which layer is current. So again, same sort of thing. I've done a revolve. I've got a profile which was revolved around to generate that. The spout is a little trickier. This was generated with a surface sweep to rails, which I did twice. I did one for the outer surface and one for the inner surface, and then I capped the ends off to create this shape here. The handle is a sweep with one rail, where I've got a profile, and a sweep, which sends it around like that. Okay, so that's the logic behind layer setup. I'll show you how to set up a new layer just quickly. I'm going to select image first, which is my bottom layer, and then I'm going to hit new layer. I'll need that, so my new layer, which I'm going to call test, I'm going to have down there. So I've got a test layer. Immediately going to make a sub layer, call that curves, and then if I was to do a new sublayer now, it would be a sublayer of curves. I don't want that. I'm going to hit text again to make a sublayer. So now I'm preserving that hierarchy. Surfaces. Okay, so at the moment we're in shaded view. Shaded view is controlled with these color icons here. So let's make this an orange surface. My curves are black, my surface is orange. So I'm going to start with curves. I'm going to do something pretty quick and simple here. Okay, that'll do. Pull that up. I'm just going to do a loft between these two. Before I do that, I'm going to jump to my surfaces layer, loft, select those two. So I've generated a surface. That surface is orange because that's that colour there. So I can do things now like I can turn off and on the curves. You can just about see that happening there, or I can turn off and on the surface. So having split them into two, that gives me that ability. Quite often what you want to do, you see, is you take that curve and you might, for instance, create a new layer called top test, and I want to take that curve and do something with it. I want to keep it associated with the bottom base bit, but if I now right click on here and say copy object to layer, I can now utilize that even though I turn off that base object. So I can now take that, do another loft. Obviously I want to create some sub layers in here first. Curves, surfaces. I've got these layers. These are now currently on top test. I actually want them to be on here, so I'm going to change object layers to there, and I'm going to make that one current, and I'm going to loft again. So let's turn that on. So that would be that's a demonstration of why you preserve this surfaces curves layer structure, because you want these curves and you want to be able to duplicate them, manipulate them, copy them and get at them easily. Okay, while we're looking at this, let's just have a play with some materials as well. So as I've said, I added a colour to this one here. Let's add a colour to that one there, so we see a difference. So we're still in shaded view. Turn that off for now. So that's fine. Let's try and look at rendered views and see what happens here. Rendered, at the moment I've got no material assigned to these layers, so I'm getting default. So this next one over is waiting for a material. So my top test surface, let's come in here and okay, let's make it bright blue, but let's make it glossy and reflective. Okay, so you see that's getting a much more rendered finish. This base one, if I wanted the same as that one, I can just come in here and the material I generated is there. So you click on this top, okay, that, so I've now got the same material applied to two different objects. Materials is a whole other video, and you want to take time and learn that interface. Okay, so that is kind of the layers thing. You don't need to worry about line types, print widths, things like that. Focus on here. You can turn things off and on, you can lock them down when you're happy. If you don't want them to move, you can change the color in shaded and you can change the color in rendered. I'm going to jump back to shaded view. Okay. Lastly, what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to delete off all of that stuff. And back to the teapot. So I want to talk about C-planes. So at the moment we've got this handle here. I'm going to delete that and start again on the handle to show you how I created it. So if I turn on the body and turn on image, I'm going to start by making my curves as the active layer. Now this is where it can get a little bit tricky. we're going to create our own C-planes. See, at the moment there's the active C-plane. Here's the C-plane tab, is in this window on the ground where you can see that grid. If we jump into these other views, the C-plane is vertical. If I see in the 3D view, as I try and create there, I'm actually creating in that plane. So there are existing C-planes, existing work planes that you can work on. So if I was to try and draw this handle, it would make sense to start in a side view, and I'm going to do this overarching curve using a spline, and I'm actually going to go up the middle of it. As mentioned before, the fewer points you can click, I'm going to go into the body on both ends, because that's going to come in useful later. Okay, so you see that's drawn there. I can turn off image now. So we've got the start of this handle. So what here I want to use is some unique C-planes. I'm going to create my own. Now there are a few different ways of doing this, but this is my quick, logical, easy to understand way of doing it for starters. Now I need something on here that's going to emulate the end of my handle. It's going to be an oval shape, and I'm going to have one down here as well. I'm going to try and center it to that point there, but this is going to be a little bit by eye. So I need a C-plane that allows me to draw kind of that view on. I want an oval like that. So how do I get my C-plane to behave like that? I'm going to start in here to start with, and maximize that up. What I'm going for here is a line that's kind of perpendicular, not snapping to anything. So if you imagine that's the side of my piece of paper, I'm going to take that using gumball. I'm going to move it out one way and press Alt before I then move it back this way to get a copy. It's currently selected. Hit Shift, grab both of them, type Loft. Now why did I do that? That allows me to create a C-plane set to object. There we go. I set it to that object. I'm now in that plane. So if I draw something, it will be oriented in the correct direction. This C-plane that I've just created here is quite useful, so I'm going to make another sublayer, call it C-plane. Actually, let's call that C-plane top, because I'm going to have to make another one. And I'm going to take that line, that surface, that line, and I'm going to dump them onto there by change object layer. Okay, I'm finished with that. Now I can turn it off, but it might be useful to get it back later on. Okay, so with that I can now center. I'm actually going to try and snap using nearest and get quite close to this surface. Doesn't have to be perfect. Now I'm holding Shift, which locks me to ortho. We covered this earlier. In fact, I'm going to disable all of my snaps for now, so I can create that shape. So you see how that worked? Jump into my side view again. Let's create another layer called C-plane bottom. Make that current. Again, take this line, use the same trick I did before by moving it using the gumball, Alt on the keyboard, pull it out while it's still selected, Shift to select the other one, and type Loft. Okay, so that's all on this C-plane bottom layer. Set C-plane to view. There we go. I want this to be back on the curves layer. I can turn that off now, and I'm going to do the same thing. Turn back on my snaps. I'm going to try and use near snap to get as near as possible to that, holding shift to come outwards. Okay, so generating C-planes, that's my methodology. I'm sure other people have got other ways of doing it, but I like the visual simplistic idea of having these little planes on turned off layers that I can turn off and on, and it's a visual clue to where the layers are, and all I'm using is set C-planes to object. One bit of best practice though is when you've finished generating using your unique C-planes, it's probably best to use this set C-plane world top again, and that takes everything back to its start point for that 3D view. So lastly, jump on here, and if I do sweep one rail, there's my rail, those are my sections, and I get this bit of tidying up to do to mask it to the body, but you get the idea. So lastly, we're going to look at duplicating edges and duplicating borders. Now, I've talked about this, putting your curves onto different layers. Sometimes it gets forgotten, sometimes it gets lost, or sometimes the curve isn't there to start with. So you can create curves from existing geometry. Let's just demonstrate how that might work. So for instance, if I'd been being a bit sloppy and I've got an oval here, I'm just going to put this roughly into place and pull it out towards us. Okay, I'm going to take this oval and project it onto this curved surface. Type in project. I'm going to be doing it in my front view. It says select the curve, happy, and then point it at the teapot itself. Okay, so I only did that because that gives me this. Projected it all the way through. I'm just going to get rid of the ones I don't want. I'm just looking at this outer surface. So this might happen. Splitting, select object to split that, and I'm going to select my line to split. So I've now got that projected oval as a different thing. I could put this, for instance, onto a new subsurface, surface 2, and have that surface 2 once I change its layer, change object layer. So I've projected a shape onto this surface and I've made that a new surface. But what happens at the moment, I've got a curve around there, but what happens if that gets deleted off? I've got this curving in two directions curve. I'll never be able to emulate that using polylines. So if you go into curves here, down the bottom, curves from objects, there's quite a few things in here, but let's just have a quick look at duplicate edge. So that allows me to select the edge to be duplicated. I'm going to grab that, and you see how it finds the edge and makes us a brand new curve out of the edge. So that can really save you if you've gotten a bit lost or lost things, or you've just generated a unique curve that you can't create any other way. You can take that, you can put it onto a new layer, and you can start building with it. Okay, so that's the end of this tutorial. I hope that helps. Thanks very much.